And I'd like to introduce to you from North Carolina, Dr. Frank Turek.
Thanks, Ken. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Don't worry, the Colts are up 14-0 last I checked. Okay?
All right.
Bengals are up 14-0 too. So you're cool. All right? Question. Why do people believe what they believe? This is the interactive portion of the program. Why do people believe what they believe? They heard it from somebody else. All right, Tom, yeah, they heard it from somebody else. They were raised that way, yeah, so they believe it because mom and dad said that's what they're going to believe. What else? Maybe they saw it themselves or they checked it out themselves, right? What are you going to say? What your friends say, yep. Yes? What so-called experts say. Yeah, they're just going to believe it based on what the experts say. Maybe there's evidence out there. Yes?
Is what's convenient or what they want to believe?
What's convenient, what they want to believe. Those of us in this room who are Christians, maybe some who are not, but are we just believing Christianity because we want to believe it? We were brought up that way. Some experts said it was true. Have we really checked it out? Is there really a being called God? Is there really a person, or was there a person called Jesus who was on the earth about 2,000 years ago, who literally did miracles, predicted and accomplished his own resurrection and proved to be God? Or is all that just kind of wishful thinking? Yes, the Bible said. How do we know the Bible's true, though? How do we know that? Do we have any evidence? Prophecies. How do we know they were fulfilled? Eyewitnesses. How do we know they're eyewitnesses? We do have historical documents, but how do we know that they were written by eyewitnesses? And how do we know those eyewitnesses were telling the truth, if they were eyewitnesses? Well, you could say they have miracles in them, and we don't tend to see too many miracles today, so maybe they're lying. How do we know they died for their faith? Muslims died for their faith. We don't think Islam's true. Some records other than Christian records, you mean? Like what? All right, Josephus, a Jewish historian, he didn't say Jesus rose from the dead. He said some people thought he rose from the dead. Yeah, we have faith, but that doesn't mean it's true, right? We could have faith that Mormonism's true, or Jehovah's Witnesses are right, or Muslims are true, or atheists are right. I think you can make the case they are, but what is that case? All right, take it easy. I mean, is there really evidence for this? By the way, why is there evidence for anything? Not just Christianity. Yeah, but why are there such a thing as proofs? People do try and prove it wrong. Why do you think people try and prove it wrong? Why would anybody not want there to be a God? Easier life. Yeah, you can do your own thing, right? If there's no God, if there's no authority beyond you, you can do whatever you want, right? That's kind of one motivation. Well, why would some people want to argue for God and not have a lot of evidence for it? What are the advantages of believing in God? You think forgiveness, you think eternal life, you think you're going to be with your loved ones in heaven when you die, and if someone dies, and you're going to see him again. So those are the advantages of believing in God. Or those are the advantages that we get if there was a God, but that doesn't mean there necessarily is one, right? What's the purpose of life? I mean, there's people over here, sorry, you're the old crowd. You're the young crowd over here. Most of you, if you lived a normal life, lifespan now is about 78 or so. Most of you are like maybe between 10 and 20, right? So if you live a normal life, maybe you got another 60 or so years. For what? What's the point? Are you just a bunch of glands? And you want to make those glands feel good on occasion, and that's it, then you die? Who cares? Make an impact on somebody's life. So what if that person's just a big gland, and then they die? Are you just trying to make glands happy? What's the point? Is there any meaning? I see people going, yeah. Well, what is it? Okay, you can have personal feelings of accomplishment for doing a lot of things. But if there is no God and you die, and there's nothing after that, what's the ultimate meaning to that? Just personal satisfaction while you're here. But that doesn't last. You die, it's over. Temporary, but then it's over. If there's no God? Well, there is. Is that just true for you? I mean, if there is a good God, why is there so much evil in the world? What does God have against homosexuals, by the way? While we're at it. Who said? How do we know the Bible's true? You believe in this old document written by Iron Age peasants 2,000 years ago? Why? What does God have against sex in general? Bible I read, he's down on just about everything. Then why is he against it so much? Because he what? Been perverted. God thinks just about everybody's a pervert then. Let's go back. What's the meaning of life? What's the point? Know God and to make him known. I think that is the meaning of life, but how do we know that's true? And what does it mean to know God? Does that mean that you just intellectually know that there's this being out there that created and sustains the world? Is that what it means? If the Bible's true, that's a big if, but if it's true, James, the half-brother of Jesus, said, even the demons know that God exists, but they tremble. Right? They know intellectually better than we do there's a God, but they don't trust in him, do they? Because they want to do their own thing. So just knowing that he exists isn't the point. Trusting in him is. Why? What's this big deal about faith? Who cares? Why would God care whether you have faith in him? What is that all about?
He's your heavenly Father. Relationship to my Father.
Relationship, trust. Don, what?
It's an encounter.
It's an encounter, okay. But why would God care? He's a perfect being. He doesn't get anything else out of us, if he exists, right? He doesn't get anything else out of us. What does he get out of us? He's perfect. You can't improve him. You can't degrade him. Why does he care what we think? All right, he loves us. Wants to share it. Does he need to share it? No. He's an infinite being, perfect being. So why does he care if we love him? Well, he already knows whether we're, if he's God, he knows everything. He knows whether we're loyal to him or not. Does he need it?
I don't think he needs it because he's a Trinity, and he already lives in a love relationship.
Right. So he does not need our love, so why is he asking for it?
He wants us to have a victorious lifestyle
Why?
because
Why? Don? Is that Don back there?
I think
Joe?
God's intelligent. He has plans. He has purpose. He created us for a purpose. And he wants us to fulfill that purpose, but we can't fulfill that purpose unless we trust him.
Amen.
If we don't trust him, then we will not fulfill his purpose.
But why does he care about a purpose for us if he's unchanged by us?
Because love wants to share.
we're his creation.
All right. Do we love God? Does God want us to love him because he gets something out of it? No, because he's an infinite being. So who gets something out of it? We do. Right? We do. So a lot of atheists will say, well, God's a cosmic killjoy. Why does he care if you love him? What's the whole point? Oh, he's up there wanting us to worship him. Does he need worship? No. We're the ones that need it. Because if you don't worship God, you're going to worship something else. What do people worship today? Money. There's only 3 things people worship other than God. I heard two things. Heard 2 of the 3. Money, sex, and power. There they are. Right there. All that is in the world is the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the boastful pride of life. 1 John 2. My friend J. Warner Wallace, the cold case homicide detective, who if you ever watch Dateline, you've seen him on there because he solved murders recently that were 30 years old in Los Angeles. He says every motivation for every crime he's ever investigated is one or more of those 3 things. Money, sex, or power. Pride, right? That's why you do anything that's illicit. Money, sex, or power. And if you think about that, those are the things people idolize. They idolize themselves, power, right? They want power. They want people to like them. They want recognition. They want to be in a position of power. They want money because they want material things. They want the comfort that comes for it. Or they want sex. They want relationships. And what we tend to do is we invert those things. We sometimes have God up top, but a lot of times other things come over God. Money, sex, or power. And whenever we do that, we're the ones that suffer. God's not suffering. He's an infinite being. He added humanity over his deity in order to take the sin on himself, live the perfect life and take the sin on himself. So he suffered in that sense, but as a divine being, he doesn't suffer. So God's not a cosmic ego looking for your worship as if he needs it. He doesn't. You need it. Because if you don't put him first, your life is ultimately going to turn out to be all about you and ultimately be a disaster. Now, with that being said, we'll delve into some of those questions we brought up a minute ago. But this is the response of a lot of young people when they go to college. I mentioned this earlier today. Dad, I don't believe in God anymore. And you know why they don't believe in God anymore? Largely because they've never been given evidence that God truly exists and that Christianity is true. How many have not been at any of the sessions so far? Not been, just so you know. Okay. So what I'm about to put up here I've already told to the rest of the group, so the rest of the group can just kind of hang out. This is known as review. But there's only 4 questions you need to answer in the affirmative to show that Christianity is true. In other words, it's not hard to show that the Bible's true, that Christianity's true. All you have to do is investigate these 4 questions, and when you investigate them, I think you'll find that the answer to every one of these 4 questions is yes. And if that's the case, Christianity is true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. grooving music is actually from our TV show, which you can watch on DirecTV channel 378 on Wednesday nights. If you don't have DirecTV, go to this website, crossexamine.org, and you can watch it streaming live. In fact, this Wednesday night, 3 days from today, the guy I just mentioned, Jim Wallace, is going to be on our TV show, The Cold Case Homicide Detective, and you're going to see him giving evidence that God exists. So if you want to watch the program this Wednesday, you'll see him. We're on Saturday mornings on radio. It's podcasted. You can listen to it on our app. And just by way of review, why are these the 4 questions? Does truth exist? All right, can somebody explain this who is here already, so I don't need to explain it again? Why do we have to do the truth question? Yeah, if truth doesn't exist, the rest of it doesn't matter. If there is no truth, then obviously the Bible can't be true. And if there is no truth, no book written by an atheist could be true either, right? So there's got to be truth. How can you show somebody there is truth? If somebody says there is no truth, what question are you going to ask them? Is that true, right? Okay? Of course it's true there's truth, because any claim that there is no truth is actually making the claim that it's true there is no truth. It's a self-defeating statement. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Okay? That would be self-defeating. So don't buy into the idea you can't know truth or there is no truth. Of course there's truth. Does God exist? Why do you have to deal with that question? Why? Why do you have to deal with the question, does God exist, if you're going to show that Christianity is true? This remains the interactive portion of the program. Can you have a word from God if there's no God? No, of course not. If there is no God, the Bible can't be true. It talks about God existing. So you have to give evidence that God exists. This morning we did this during the service. We gave 3 lines of evidence that God exists. What was the first line? Anyone? Or first argument? Cosmological argument. The argument from the beginning of the universe, that space-time and matter had a beginning out of nothing. Well, if space-time and matter had a beginning out of nothing, whatever caused space-time and matter can't be made of space-time and matter, right? In other words, the cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create, and also intelligent because this universe is put together with extreme precision. Now, when you think of a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? That's what we mean by God. So there's evidence there that this being does exist. The third question, are miracles possible? Obviously, the Bible can't be true if miracles are not possible. But the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and we're going to talk about that at 6 o'clock tonight. And then we're also going to talk about why the New Testament's true tonight at 6 o'clock. In fact, some of you are looking at that going, well, wait, what about the Old Testament? If the New Testament's reliable, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Why? Why? Yes, because if Jesus really is God, as the New Testament documents claim he is, and the New Testament documents are telling us the truth about what Jesus said, then Jesus said the entire Old Testament is the Word of God. So if the New Testament's just reliable, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Okay? That's kind of the big argument for why Christianity is true. Now, we're not going to go through all this here this afternoon because we've already done it earlier and we're going to do it tonight. I want to deal more with Q&A. I know you guys have a lot of questions. But if you want to go further into this, you can get the books on the book table and the complete DVD set that'll go into more depth than what we're doing here. And then the new book, Stealing from God, which is not about tithing. Thank you, Susan. It's not about tithing. The book, Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. And we're going to see how atheists steal from God here in just a few minutes when we go through some of these questions. Now, these are the 4 questions you need to answer to show that Christianity is true. But whenever you try and make the case that Christianity is true, you're going to get objections. And the objections come in one of what we call the 4 E's. Evil, evolution, ethics, or eternity. In other words, 95% of the questions that I get and other people that do this get are in one of these 4 categories. They're going to say, if there is a good God, why is there evil? Or if God does exist, the Bible doesn't talk about evolution, but it seems that the science says evolution is true. And ethics, why did God kill the Canaanites? Why is there slavery in the Bible? What does God have against homosexuality? These are the kind of questions that you get. And then under eternity, why would God send me to hell just because I don't believe in Jesus? What about those that have never heard? In fact, we talked about that last night a little bit. Those are the kind of questions you get. Now, how many people here have an iPhone, a Droid, or a Windows phone? Take it out right now. You never do this in church, do you? You got it right there? Okay, take out your phone. And I want you to go download this app, Cross-Examined app. 2 words in the App Store. 2 words, Cross-Examined. Cross-Examined, 2 words. See if you can find it. Are you downloading? All right. One person has it. Are you guys finding it over here? Okay, download it. It'll take a minute. It'll take a week. Oh, you got a weak signal? Insufficient storage. Susan, it sounds like you're going to have to get that Oprah Winfrey app off there and put on the Cross-Examined app, okay? Come on. All right? Do you guys have cell coverage in here or not? Is it downloading? All right. All right. You got it, Tom? Oh, I thought the Wi-Fi didn't work in here. Does it?
Yes.
Oh, what? You want to give it out? Jerry, what's the password for Wi-Fi? Oh, forget it. Forget it. We'll get it later. It's about this long. And then they were out of time. All right, if you got it, what you're going to notice in the app is that if you go to the quick answer section down here, you see something that says quick answers? Okay? And then across the top, you're going to see truth, God, miracles, Bible, and then the 4 E's. They only gave us 4 categories here. So here are the 4 questions. Truth, God, miracles, Bible. And then here's the 4 objections. And if you click on 4 E's, you're going to see evolution, evil, ethics, and eternity. And then if you were to drill down further, you would find the individual questions. Okay? But the one I want to point you to is I want you to click on the truth one. You got the truth one there? And then it says start here. You see that one that says start here in there? Yeah, ask those questions. We're going to come back to those questions later. Those are the questions you always want to ask people who say things about Christianity that you think are false. You just want to ask those questions. Many of the things we're going to go through here today are in the app. That's why I wanted you to have the app. It's about 75,000 people have downloaded it, so they're finding it helpful. And that quick answer section can really help you if you're having a conversation with somebody and they say something that's wrong against Christianity. You're not quite sure how to answer it. You go to the quick answer section in the app and you find out which objection they're bringing up. Okay? Now I want to go back to the book of Daniel for just a second. You know, in the book of Daniel, the king there, Nebuchadnezzar, built this gold statue, right? And everybody was supposed to worship the gold statue. And what would happen if somebody didn't worship the gold statue? They were going to be thrown into the furnace. It's kind of like today. We're getting to the point here where if you don't bow to political correctness, if you don't keep your faith private, you're going to be in trouble. But we're not supposed to keep our faith private because our faith, which by the way, the better word is trust, not faith. Faith makes it seem like you don't have any evidence. Our trust in Christ is based on evidence. And you know what Paul says we're supposed to do? We're supposed to destroy people's arguments and any proud thing that raises itself up against the knowledge of God. He says we're supposed to do this and take every thought captive to Christ. Now, how do you do that? Well, you ask for Jesus' help. Check this out.
You might question the sanity of these 2 guys who decided to pull off an illegal urban wingsuit stunt in Rio de Janeiro. As you can see, the men were Red Bull wingsuit daredevils. They actually successfully threaded the needle between 2 skyscrapers in Rio. One of the daredevils attempted to fly by one of Brazil's famous monuments. Fortunately for him, that was his final stunt.
That's what you do. You ask Jesus for help, and he comes out and slaps those guys away for you. No. You got to have some evidence. Now, what I'd like to do is I've got a bunch of questions that I typically get on a college campus from young and old people, and I could go through those questions, but I'd rather see if you have any questions And then if you don't, then we'll go through some of these. Okay, so what kind of questions are you getting? And Angie, you had a bunch of questions already written down. Just 2, that's it? Anyone have any questions? You don't have to write them down. You can just say them if you want to. But, all right, what are they? Go ahead. Just you can just read them out.
How do you defend gays who say they are born that way? God created them.
Okay, excellent question. The question about homosexuality. 2 things. Number 1, when somebody says they're born that way, what kind of argument is that? It's called a design argument, right? That God designed me this way, so therefore He wants me to act this way. But where do sexual feelings come from? Do we know? You see, there's a difference between sexual attractions and sexual actions. Everybody has attractions. The question is, do you have or should you always act on your attractions? No, in fact, if you act on your attractions, most of the time you're going to get yourself in trouble. Right? So just because you have attractions doesn't mean you ought to act on them. Now, when people are saying they're born that way, I've had conversations with gay activists on this, and I remember one guy, he said, I was born this way. I said, how do you know that? Go back to those questions. Remember the questions I have in there? Ask the right questions? The first question is, what do you mean by that? The second question is, how did you come to that conclusion? So I'm asking the second question. How did you come to that conclusion that you were born that way? You know what his answer was? From when I was 9 years old, I was looking at men rather than women. Okay. Does that prove that someone was born that way? No. Because he was 9, he started looking at men rather than women? What does that prove? Nothing. I mean, who knows if he had some sort of upbringing issue? Or maybe there is some kind of genetic factor here. That's possible. But let me ask you a question. If homosexuality, if there is some kind of gene for homosexuality, and by the way, there's been studies done and they can never find one. It's inconclusive because they've done identical twin studies. You know what, identical twins have the same DNA, yet they never, or they don't always grow up to have the same attractions. So it can't be just a genetic issue. But if there is some sort of genetic factor for homosexuality, how is this genetic factor or gene passed on? Are you guys with me on this? Do you see where I'm going with this? Homosexuals, by definition, don't reproduce, so how would it ever be passed on? Have you guys had the birds and the bees talk? Okay. That's my first question. My second question is, it is a design argument. So if somebody says, God designed me this way, that's a theory, right? If he's going to say that God gave him these desires, he has to admit that God gave him this body. We know where your body came from, but we don't know where your desires came from. In other words, if God designed you with these desires, why is he giving you why is he giving you desires that conflict with your body? He certainly designed your body. Did he design your desires too? If you don't follow the design of your desires, that can be uncomfortable. But if you don't follow the design of your body, that can be fatal. And the medical consequences of homosexual behavior are extremely negative. No one ever talks about that anymore. They make it seem like it's the same as it's not the same as heterosexuality. The average lifespan for a homosexual is anywhere from 8 to 20 years shorter than a heterosexual. It's very medically dangerous behavior. The other thing you could say about it is, even if it were true, that wouldn't necessarily mean that you ought to do it. I mean, if I were to say, look, I was born with the anti-gay gene, does that make gay bashing okay for me? Of course not. So, being born a certain way doesn't necessarily mean you ought to act on the behavior. Now, one thing that Christians are very bad at, all of us are bad at, is this is an issue that many Christians don't want to deal with. But everybody's welcome in the church. Especially if you're dealing with sin, and we all are, you should come to church. The only people who are not welcome in the church are those who say that known sin is not sin. Paul says, expel the immoral brother in 1 Corinthians 5. Every homosexual is welcome in the church. The only people who are not welcome in the church are those who say they're believers and yet say that the Word of God is false on a particular point when it comes to moral behavior. Because that's what was going on in the church in Corinth when one guy was sleeping with his father's wife, and Paul said, expel this guy out of here. Why? For his good. So maybe Satan will deal with him and he'll come back. Now it turns out when he writes 2 Corinthians, it turns out expelling the guy from the church worked because he came back and repented. It seems anyway. So being born a certain way doesn't make something right or wrong, even if being born that way is really what happens. I don't know about you, but most of you men in here will agree, we're born to sleep with many women. I'm just telling you the truth, right? That men want to sleep with many women. I'm just telling you the truth. Men, do you disagree? No. Okay? Be honest, right? We don't do it, most of us. Why? Because we know it's wrong. And we know we're going to destroy ourselves and other people if we do it. But most men are that way. Does that mean we ought to be that way? No, we're fallen. In fact, we're all born with an orientation toward bad behavior. Every one of us. And for any one of us to say that this orientation that we have is a good thing is really dangerous, because it's not. Now, since you guys brought up the issue of sex, which no one likes to talk about, first question is about sex. Can't believe it. This was the 7th question we were going to talk about, so let me jump to it. We were going to talk about how old is the universe. We've already talked about that. We can still talk about any of these if you want as we go. If God exists, why does evil exist? There's no purpose for evil. Is God immoral for killing the Canaanites in the Old Testament? These are the 7 questions that I get a lot. Does the Bible condone slavery? Does evolution disprove God? And what does God have against sex? So let's deal with that one. Okay? First of all, does everyone know what sex is? Before we move on. Okay, good. Question, does the Bible single out only homosexuality? It doesn't. In fact, if you look at the Bible, God approves only sex between a man and a woman within the bond of marriage. All other sexual activity is harmful and prohibited. Fornication, which means what? Sex outside of marriage, premarital sex. Polygamy, adultery, bestiality, incest, homosexuality, anything else is considered a problem. Why? Why do you think it would be a problem? What's the big deal? Why would God be going, why are you guys doing that down there? Knock it off.
Because he wants to protect us.
He does want to protect us. Does God have, are God's rules which flow from his nature, are they arbitrary or are they there for a reason? They're there for a reason. Does God get anything out of it? No. So we do. In fact, sex is like fire. If you put fire in your fireplace on a cold winter's night, it's wonderful, right? It'll warm you. But if you put fire anywhere else in your house, it will burn your house down. And that's what sex is. It's like fire. You have to keep it in the right place. Then it's wonderful. Anywhere else, it's a disaster. Maybe not short-term, long-term disaster. In fact, let me ask you some questions. First question, is sex just physical? The culture says it's just physical. It's just like a sport. You know? You can just move on to somebody else when you're done. No problems. Question. If sex is just physical, why is it worse if somebody rapes you than if somebody just physically assaults you? Because sex is not just physical. Sex is emotional. Sex is moral. Sex is biological. It's not just physical. There's a lot more to it than that. Secondly, do you know that sex changes your brain chemistry as well as pornography? Guys, pornography. dangerous. Oh, fun short term, disaster long term. Why? Because there are hormones that are released in your brain that change your brain structure. Your brain is plastic. Why do people get addicted to things? Because your brain is plastic. I don't mean plastic like this kind of plastic. I mean it can actually change its structure. And when people get addicted to certain things, their brain has actually changed its structure. And that's why it's hard to break addictions. And whether it's pornography or illicit sexuality, you are changing your brain structure so that it's very difficult, A, to get away from that kind of behavior, and then B, to bond with somebody you ultimately want to bond with. Having sex outside of marriage is like putting a Band-Aid on and tearing it off over and over again. What happens to the stickiness of the Band-Aid? It evaporates eventually. It won't stick to anything anymore. That's what happens if you have sex outside of marriage with several people. What you're doing is you're reducing your capacity to bond with somebody you ultimately want to bond with. So it actually changes your brain chemistry. Thirdly, love binds, sacrifices, and protects. It doesn't use. Ladies, you're going to hear this from the young men, potentially. If you love me, you'll have sex with me. That's what you're going to hear. You know who uses lines like that? Perpetrators, manipulators. By the way, sex won't get you, sex will not cause somebody to love you. Sex is the fruit of a relationship. It's not the root of a relationship. If you want somebody to love you, if they truly loved you, they would only have sex with you by sacrificing for you, by binding with you, by protecting you. That's why if somebody wants to have sex with you prior to marriage, first of all, it's natural to want to do that, don't get me wrong. But if they are trying to coerce you into doing that, they're not interested in you. They're not interested in binding with you, sacrificing for you, or protecting you. They're interested in them. That's what they're interested in. Because if they truly did love you, they'd want to bind with you, protect you, and sacrifice for you. Which means they want to save you so they could have you with him. He could have you with him forever. That's what marriage is. So, in fact, if you read 1 Corinthians 15, which is the passage everyone reads at weddings, right? Love is kind. Love is not self-seeking. Love keeps no record of wrongs. All these wonderful things about love, none of them are evident in premarital sex. You say, well, what if both people agree? If both people agree, then you're both just using one another. Now you just got two people who are using one another. Because if you truly love somebody, you will want to bind with them, you will want to sacrifice for them, you will want to protect them. Also, you are made for something better. These are all like negative consequences. But if you truly want to experience something better, you have to put it in its proper context. Sure, you could have sex now. It's fun short term. But long term, you're giving up something much better. You ever hear the phrase opportunity cost? What's an opportunity cost? If I do this now, it means I can't do something better later. And you know, one of the number one indicators of success among young people is the ability to delay instant gratification. Have you ever seen the studies where they do on the little kids? They bring them into a room and they put the camera on them and they say, they put an M&M in front of them and they go, if you can leave that M&M alone for 3 minutes, I'm going to come back in and give you 3 more, right? Now, they did this with all sorts of different kids. The kids that couldn't delay instant gratification just went, they ate it. The kids that could delay instant gratification just waited and they got rewarded for 3 more. Then there were kids in between, right? It's sitting there on the table. They put their head on the table they'd stick their tongue out, you know, just to get a little taste of it. You know, they wanted to be like in between. But they did longitudinal studies where they traced these kids throughout life. And the kids that could delay instant gratification were far more successful in life than the ones that just said, I got to have it now. And that's true of everything you do, not just sex. C.S. Lewis put it this way: for any success to be achieved, quite a lot of restraint is going to be necessary. We live in a fallen and dangerous world. If you follow your feelings all over the place, you're going to end up a disaster. Someone put it this way: logic makes life safe. Motion makes life fun, but logic makes life safe. You can't just follow your emotions all over the place. If you do, you're going to end in disaster. So you're made for something better. What's that better? To find one person that you can truly sacrifice for, bind to, and protect for the rest of your life. And by the way, this holds true in all the surveys. Married couples are far more satisfied than people who are not, or people who bounce between relationships. The people who bounce between relationships have that short-term high, long-term low. So, and if you know theologically, what's the real illustration marriage, or what marriage illustrates? Marriage illustrates our ultimate union with Christ. So, sex is wonderful, but it's also dangerous. And that's true about many things in life, right? There are many things. Food is wonderful, but it can also be dangerous. It's got to be used in moderation. It's got to be used the right way. All right. What was the next question we had? Oh, and by the way, what did Jesus say about it? One last thing. Jesus affirmed natural marriage. Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Consequently, they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. You know, it amazes me there are Christians out there who somehow think same-sex marriage is a good thing. I have a hard time thinking that you can disagree with Jesus and be a good Christian. You know? Now you may think, well, and let me say on the surface, to be for same-sex marriage appears to be a good thing because it appears that you're trying to help people and that you're for people, but in reality, you're not. You're encouraging people to engage in a relationship that's not only medically destructive, but also problematic from Jesus' standpoint, which he is the standard of morality. He is the standard of rightness. And I wrote a little book on this. We don't have time to get into it all, but it's called Correct, Not Politically Correct, How Same-Sex Marriage Hurts Everyone. So it's on the book table out there. All right, I'm sorry. What was the next question?
If God is purely good and killing is morally wrong, then how could God commit genocide when he flooded the earth?
All right, flooding the earth. First of all, that's the Noah issue. Same kind of thing happened with the Canaanites. So why don't we do with that? Because I have a slide for it. Is God immoral for killing the Canaanites, or is God immoral for killing all the people in Noah's day, right? That's the question. First of all, what does the Bible say about killing? What does the commandment say in the Ten Commandments? What does it really say? Thou shalt not murder. Doesn't say kill. Why? Because there are justified reasons to kill. Self-defense, for example, or just war. But murder is wrong. So let's take a look at this. Is God immoral for killing the Canaanites? Now, if an atheist asks me this question, I'm going to say, if there is no God, why is anything wrong, including any so-called atrocity in the Old Testament, right? Because again, if there is no God, there is no standard of good, which means nothing can be moral or immoral. Everything's just a matter of opinion. So whatever the so-called God does in the Old Testament can't be good or bad, because if he doesn't exist, there's no standard of good or bad. So what are you complaining about? But it's a fair question to ask us as Christians, how could this good God do these things? How could he kill people? Why would he do such a thing? Well, let me ask you the question this way. Is God arbitrary, or does he give reasons for judging people in the Old Testament? He gives reasons. What are the reasons he doesn't, or he wants the Canaanites to be punished? What's the main reason? They're sacrificing their children to who? This is Molech. This is the Canaanite god, a metal god. You can see a fire they'd have in the belly of this god. They would heat this being up, this metal idol up. Then they put their children on the arms of this molten hot metal being, this idol, and they basically cook their children on Molech. And what the drummers would do there at the ceremony of them sacrificing their children is they would pound their drums louder so the parents couldn't hear the screams of their children being sacrificed. Now, in every college campus I go to, there's somebody who says, if there is a good God, why doesn't he stop all the evil in the world? Well, here's an instance where God steps in and wants to stop the evil, and the atheists are complaining about it. You notice that? I mean, why complain that God doesn't stop evil, but then complain when he does? I mean, do you think God should have stopped this? Okay, so he does, and the atheists are complaining about it. But why are they complaining about it? They're complaining about it because he says, well, he told the Israelites to kill everyone, including the women and the children. That's not fair. That's not right. That's not just. Why not just kill the people who were doing this? To cleanse the whole thing away? Well, here's the key question now for you. Is God committing murder by ending lives on earth? First of all, can God murder anyone? Why can't God murder anyone? We can murder someone because we're not the creator of life, right? We can't resurrect life. But God can't murder anyone. Why? He's the creator and the resurrector, if you will, of life as well. He owns life. He can take life or give life anytime he wants. So what might be murder for us is not murder for God. God says we shouldn't murder, but if God wants to end somebody's life, he can do it at any time. Look, when you die, and we're all going to die in here at one point, unless God comes before that, Christ comes before that. When you die, does God murder you? No. He doesn't murder anyone. In fact, if Christianity is true, people don't really die, they just change location. Right? God can move you from this life to the next life anytime he wants. In fact, God has the right to usher people into the next life, whether they are 2 years old or 82 years old. So it's up to God. If he wants to take people out at 2 years old, he can do that. If he wants to take them out at 82, he can do that, or anywhere in between. You need to also recognize that the Old Testament theocracy was unique and temporary. It was not the ideal for all time, but a means to the promised new covenant. In other words, God was trying to get the promised people in the promised land to bring forth the promised Messiah so the promised Messiah could save the whole world, and he had to do this through free creatures. And he's got this group of Canaanites in the Holy Land who are debauched, and he warns them for 400 years, and finally he says, all right, we're just going to have to move them out of there. And so he does. Now, it's totally legitimate for God to do this because he's God. You know what amazes me? There are people out there, atheists, like Bill Maher. You know who Bill Maher is? I was on his show several years ago when he was on ABC, and we had a little argument over abortion. And Bill Maher is the kind of guy that says, I asked him, I said, do you believe a woman has a right to abortion? He says, oh, yes. Okay. He's the same guy on TV who was complaining about Noah. The very question we just got here. Now, here's my question. Why is it that when God plays God in the Bible and kills people, he's immoral? But when Bill Maher plays God and kills people here on earth, that's a moral right? You ever think about that? When God plays God, he's immoral, but when we play God, that's our moral right? When we decide who lives and who dies through abortion? Seems like there's a double standard going on here. God can't have the right, but we can. Do we have any other questions?
I think you just kind of answered this, but if God is good, why do kids suffer with deadly diseases?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mentioned earlier that there are two types of questions here. There are academic questions, and then there are more emotional questions or pastoral questions. And it depends on who's asking the question as to what the real answer is. Because Ravi Zacharias, a Christian apologist, says, remember, when you're answering a question, you're really answering a person. So someone can walk up to a microphone and say, if there's a good God, why is there evil in the world? It may be a pure academic question. Somebody else could walk up to the microphone and ask the same question, but that person just lost their baby 2 weeks ago. There's a different answer for that. There's an academic answer for the first and a pastoral answer for the second. But since I'm not a pastor, let me give you the academic answer. And if you're going through suffering, it may not resonate with you, but I think this is the intellectual answer. I was at Michigan State a few years ago during the doing a I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist presentation, and an atheist was sitting in the audience during the presentation. And I knew he was in the audience because I knew he was an atheist because he sat there the entire time like this. Didn't crack a smile once. And I had some pretty good jokes in there. He just sat there. So I knew during the Q&A he was going to have probably a tough question. So I said, are there any questions? He shot his hand up right over here. I said, yes, sir. He said, if there is a good God, why doesn't he stop all the evil in the world? I said, sir, that's an excellent question. Maybe because if he did, he might start with you or me, because we do evil every day. Do you ever notice that whenever we complain about evil, we're always complaining about somebody else doing evil? We never complain about ourselves. But if God were to stop all the evil in the world, in our current fallen state, he'd have to take away our free will. If he takes away our free will, we can't love anymore, can we? So this is no longer a moral universe. And then I said, sir, it is an excellent question. I can't give you a complete answer, but let me give you a doorway to an answer. Because we could talk for semesters about if God, why evil. But let me just give you one quick answer here. It's a short video. It's 1 minute and 46 seconds long. But there's a lot going on in this video. It's a kinetic video. So let me show you the video, and then we'll talk. I'm going to show it to you right now, okay? 1 minute, 46 seconds. You ready? Here we go.
Is God good? If he is, why is there suffering and evil? Let's assume for the moment that God is all-powerful. This means that God can do anything that is logically possible. So he can create galaxies and subatomic particles and rainforests and you. But God cannot do what is logically impossible. He cannot make a square circle or a one-ended stick. So can God make a rock so big that he can't lift it? No. So what if, when God created human beings, he wanted them to be free? Freedom's a good thing, but if humans are to be free, they cannot be forced to obey God. Because freedom without choice is like a square circle. It's a logical contradiction. No choice, no freedom. God didn't want robots. He wanted real people. The first humans endowed with the awesome power of free choice abused their freedom. The tragic consequences of their bad choice and our bad choices ripple across the world. God is responsible for the fact of freedom, but humans are responsible for their acts of freedom. But let's remember, we don't suffer alone. God will put an end to suffering and evil. And God became a man to suffer with us. God is good, and he wants real people like you to know him, but the free choice is yours.
Now, that doesn't answer everything, but it gives you a doorway to an answer, that we have free will. And if there is evil in the world, there has to be a standard of good. In fact, C.S. Lewis thought there couldn't be a God because there was too much evil in the world. Then when he became a Christian, he realized this. He ultimately wrote it in the book Mere Christianity. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust, but how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? You see, something can't be unjust unless something is just. Something can't be not right unless something is right. So if you think there's evil in the world, then God exists. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but evil proves there's a God. Not because God is doing evil, but because evil is only possible if good exists, and good is only possible if God exists. In fact, you can put it this way. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you have to have sunshine. Oh, you can have sunshine without shadows. You can have good without evil, but you can't have evil without good. You can't have shadows without sunshine. So if there's something really wrong with the world, and we all know there is, then God exists. Now, you might ask, why does a particular baby die? There's no way of knowing why a particular baby dies, but there's a way of knowing why babies die. Because we live in a fallen world, and God can bring good even from evil. In fact, you guys know this from the movie It's a Wonderful Life, which was not filmed in Bedford, but New Bedford, right? Or Bedford Falls. What was it? Bedford Falls. Well, Mary. You guys have all seen It's a Wonderful Life, right? What's the moral of the story, It's a Wonderful Life? That no matter how bad things go, there's an aspect of life that's wonderful, and that you have more of an impact for good than you realize, right? Everything goes wrong in Jimmy Stewart's life. He thinks until an angel gives him the capacity to see what the town would have been like if he never existed. And he comes back and he sees all these, oh, gee, I didn't know I had that positive effect on people. I mentioned this last night. This is called the ripple effect. What's the ripple effect? The ripple effect is that an event that occurs today can and does send forth a ripple of effects into the future that affect trillions of other events. In fact, you're in this room right now because of the ripple effect, at least partially. We wouldn't be in this room if there weren't trillions of events prior to us that helped get us to this point, right? Now, a particular baby dies. I can't tell why that baby died, but I can tell you why. I know why. I don't know why. I'm finite, God's infinite. God can see how the ripple effect is going to affect the rest of the future. I can't. Maybe that baby dying creates a ripple effect into the future that helps bring a great evangelist 100 years from now that saves millions of people. And partially due to that baby dying. Now, can God bring good from that baby dying? Yeah, of course he can. We can't see it all the time, but God can. In fact, God guarantees it will happen. That's why he says in Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. He doesn't say all things are good. He says all things work together for good for those who love God and called according to his purpose. Doesn't mean all things are good, but all things can work together for good. So the ripple effect kind of has really helped me deal with issues like that because I know why I don't know why a particular bad event occurs. And I know God does. In fact, that's the whole theme of the book of Job, isn't it? Just trust me, Job. You don't even know how the physical world works, and you're going to lecture me on the moral world? This is all in the chapter in Stealing from God, which is not about tithing. Thank you, Susan. It's in the chapter on evil in there. All right, what else? What else do we have? Doesn't have to be anything written down. You can just raise your hand and say something. Where did Cain get his wife? I think it's pretty obvious. eharmony.com. Okay. Those are the tough ones. Sorry, we're out of time. Cain got his wife from his sister. Remember, the Bible can only trace so many people. You say, well, that's incest. Not in that time. There was no genetic issues at that point. It's only later on did we have mutations get into the genome, and that would have created the problem. But the Bible can only trace so many people. It can't trace everybody. So I'm sure he had a sister at that point or somebody else, and that's how Cain got his wife. He raised Cain. Got married. That's it? We're done? Come on, it's got to be more than that. Yes, sir. What about him? Dinosaurs and men depends on how old the universe is. As we talked about during the service today, depends on whether the universe is thousands of years old or millions of years old. If it's thousands of years old, yeah, maybe they were together. If they're millions of years old, then no, they got wiped out, maybe in the flood or something. Well, they could have got wiped out in the flood either way. But yeah, we don't know where dinosaurs were in the timeline. Most scientists think the universe is old based on a converging group of evidences. But again, all those evidences require assumptions that can't be proven. But if the universe is old, they probably got wiped out at some point in the distant past, either by a flood or some other geologic event like a meteor strike or something like that. Yes, sir?
Well, in that, then how do you explain death?
In what sense?
Well, didn't sin bring death into the world?
Okay, well, Romans 5:12 does not say death came to all creation. It says death came to all men by sin. So,
And I got another question. Why were Adam and Eve not gonna die?
I don't know. It could be enjoyment, right? I don't know. But, yeah, the Bible doesn't say that death came to all creation. It says it came to all men. So, and as Walt Kaiser, an Old Testament professor, points out, there's a fall before the fall. What's the fall before the fall? Satan? Did that affect creation? We don't know. We're speculating quite a bit. So there's a lot of speculation that goes into dating, whether it's young Earth, old Earth, or somewhere in between. And that's why I don't take a strong position on it, because any one of them could be true. But does it really matter which one is true? No, that God created is more certain than when. Usually when people ask me the question, how old is the universe? I go, I'm absolutely certain it's at least 53 years old. Okay? I throw my dad in there. It's at least 79. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, that passage in Genesis 6, nobody's sure about that. There's 4 different views, and I don't know which one's true. I'm not going to take a hard position on that. Yes, sir? Nope. That's okay. We can hear you. Say it loud.
Have you ever investigated some of the books that have come out of Genesis.com or Answers to Genesis? They've written out a lot of these early questions where man was, when the dinosaurs.
Yeah, I know. There's many different theories about it, and I know about those organizations, but I don't take a strong position because I don't think it matters. I'm more interested in the big issues, that Christianity's true. Then we can argue over these internal, what does Genesis 6 mean? It obviously has nothing to do with salvation. So my mentor, Norman Geisler, has 4 different views in his book, When Critics Ask, and he goes, I don't know which is the right one. So while someone could make a strong case one way or the other and may be interesting, I'm not going to take a strong position because I don't think it's that critical.
So you're not going to investigate it?
No, I have investigated it, but I'm not going to take a strong position. Because I don't, it's not a salvation issue, right? Yes?
What about people who society, aliens and all that? Do you think that God has other universes, other places, other people, other things that He created?
Have you guys heard of Area 51? 1947, something landed in Area 51. We don't know what. But 9 months to the day later, Al Gore was born. I'm just saying! I don't know if there are aliens. I know there are angels on other planets, according to the Bible, but speculation. Right. Well, I don't understand how that would affect whether God exists or not. I mean, if there are aliens elsewhere, then who created the aliens? It wouldn't matter whether there's aliens elsewhere or not. If we exist, there must be a creator for us. What? Yeah, I would say, what does it matter? It doesn't matter whether there are aliens out there from a God perspective anyway. So there are, there aren't. I don't know. Yes, Tom?
If the church is losing 75% of the youth to off college, what is that?
I think we have to teach apologetics evidence from the earliest time, from when they're brought up all the way through middle school, junior high, high school. And you have to model it as well. You just can't. By the way, there's a good technique that Os Guinness came up with. He's a speaker for Ravi Zacharias and others. You ever hear of playing Spot the Lie? Spot the lie. If you're a parent and you've got kids, say you turn on the TV and there's some sort of thing on the TV that you know is a lie. Maybe they're showing a sitcom about premarital sex and there's never any negative consequences. You just say to your kid, hey, spot the lie. What's the lie in this? Right? Spot the lie. It's a natural way to teach the Christian worldview without having to go, okay, let's open our Bible. Oh, Dad! Right? Just a natural way of doing it. So play Spot the Lie. It's kind of fun, too. Right? You can watch TV, commercials, you can read a book, you can just be walking through the mall, spot the lie, you know. Yes, ma'am. Have you dealt with other religions, yeah, Taoists, Buddhists, and all this? You don't get a lot of that here in America. On occasion you do. But the way I can show that, in my view anyway, that those worldviews can't be true on everything is if God exists, Hinduism, atheism, some forms of Buddhism can't be true. Why? Because they're not theistic. Right? I mean, if theism's true, any non-theism is false. Now, I'm not saying everything that a world religion teaches is false. Most world religions teach something that's true, right? But on the issue of the existence and nature of God, they appear to have it wrong. And for me, that's a big deal, right? If God exists is a big question. In fact, it's the most important question any person can answer. Because if God exists, there is a real meaning and objective purpose to life. If God doesn't exist, there isn't. Does that affect how you should live? Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Where does it say that? Right. Yeah. Right. All right, let's deal with the slavery issue first, okay, very briefly. Does the Bible condone slavery? This book by Paul Copan's, maybe 4 or 5 years old, very good book, Is God a Moral Monster? It deals with many of these Old Testament questions, okay? I'd highly recommend this book. He's an instructor down at Palm Beach College down there, brilliant guy. Is God a moral monster? Okay. First of all, the slavery that we see in the Old Testament is not the kind of slavery we saw in America 150 years ago. It was not race-based forced servitude. It was a voluntary means of working off debt. In other words, slaves were more like servants, paid servants. They were more like employees almost. Slave trading is condemned in the Bible, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. In fact, it's actually punishable by death in the Old Testament. Thirdly, the Bible teaches that all are made in the image of God. Slave and master are equally human, protected, and one in Christ. This is taught in Exodus, Deuteronomy, Job, and Galatians. So this is through the Old and the New Testaments. By the way, I was just talking to Paul about this just a few months ago. We were out in Colorado together. He said the translations ought to say servant rather than slave, because that's really the truth. It's not slave. Because when we think of slavery today, we're thinking 1850s slavery, right? The Bible's talking about a different kind, which is servitude. Also, Jesus came to set the captives free. And I would say the one verse that, well, the entire teaching of the Bible shows that slavery is wrong. Do unto others. You think that covers it? Yes. And finally, the Bible's main goal is spiritual redemption, not social reform, but redemption achieves reform. The Bible is not going to address every moral issue out there. Its goal is to get people saved and then sanctified, but it might not address every particular issue. It certainly doesn't address, embryonic stem cell research or any of these things, right? You're supposed to take principles consistent with the natural law and the Bible and apply them to those issues. Well, you were going to say something, Susan?
Does the slavery in the Bible, is it more similar to indentured servitude?
Yes, indentured servitude. I think I may have said it in here. I said forced servitude. It's not forced servitude. It was more indentured servitude. Yes. Yes, and they were freed after 7 years. But many of them became bond servants. What does that mean? They liked their living arrangement, so they would bond themselves to their servant or to their master for life. They would be an employee forever. Okay. Now, with regard to your other question about the Bible records sleeping with concubines and all this. Not everything recorded in the Bible is approved by God. The Bible records a lot of sin. It records David's murder. It records David's adultery. It records Solomon's 600 wives and 300 porcupines or whatever he had. That doesn't mean that the Bible approves it. In fact, every time polygamy or concubines are involved, if you follow what happens to those people, disaster every time. In fact, where do we get the Muslims from? Abraham. Abraham couldn't wait. So he gets Hagar. He has a baby with Hagar, who gives birth to Ishmael. Then Sarah finally does get pregnant, and he banishes Hagar and Ishmael out into the wilderness, and they become the bloodline of the Arabians. And it says, Ishmael lived in enmity with all of his neighbors. The Bible calls Ishmael a wild donkey of a man. So ultimately, the two civilizations which are coming now to an ultimate clash really come from the blood of Abraham. Because Abraham couldn't wait. There's another reason to wait. You could create a whole new world movement against God. Anybody else? Yep. Yes, ma'am.
We just moved up north, and it's very diverse up there, and we have Muslims that live
Are you in Michigan?
close to it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Little Camp Point.
Mm-hmm.
We have Muslims that live across the street from us.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids, they talk to the boy, goes to school. I never see the mom out.
Okay.
How do you, I can talk to anybody about religion, but I'm like, okay, am I going to say something? Am I going to have my house burnt down the next day? It's just a whole different world up there.
It is, and if you want to approach somebody, I think you just approach them one-on-one. When you're talking to Muslims, you don't want to talk to them in a group because they can't lose face in a group. And some of that's cultural. People in that culture like to argue, and when they raise their voice at you, that doesn't mean they don't like you. It's just the way they deal with things. As you know, in Islam, you can be killed for leaving Islam, according to Surah 3, the 3rd chapter in the Quran. So it's very, very difficult for a Muslim to leave Islam because they're literally putting their lives on the line in some cases. They're certainly putting their family on the line because the family often disfellowships them, just like Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. So it would be a very slow approach with a Muslim. You might bring them along very incrementally. And I would just ask questions about, if I had a Muslim neighbor, I would want to know why they believed what they believed. And I would just keep asking the why questions, kind of like what we did before. Well, why do you believe, they say the Quran's true, I'd say, why do you believe the Quran's true? What evidence do you have that it's true?
The boy told my son, I think, well, if I memorize the Quran, then they give it hard or something, and then they get the license, and he's like, I don't want to memorize it or whatever. And so, what was it, Thursday, they didn't go to school because they was celebrating a holiday or something, and there was a bunch of them over that day at their house. It almost, in theory,
Well, I think you do, because this is Satan's world, as you know, and we all are dealing with all sorts of different belief systems out there. In fact, spiritual warfare is more about the mind. It's not about spooky stuff like, where's there a demon? It's more about ideas. That's why Paul says, destroy arguments and take every thought captive to Christ. So if people have ideas that are against Christianity, and Islam certainly has many of them, it's more of a spiritual warfare issue, and that's why you have to pray a lot. That's why you have to ask the right questions. And you got to love people, right? I mean, they're people, so just try and love them. Yes?
Do you have a sense that we're in prophetically significant times in relation to the end of the age?
If Jesus doesn't know when the end of the time is, I don't know. And nobody on TV knows either. Okay, Jesus as a man didn't know when the end was coming. He knew as God, but not as man. So if he's not going to make a prediction, neither am I. Jesus said, I'm going to come as a thief in the night. It might happen tomorrow or tonight. It may happen 10,000 years from now. I don't know. So I never get into that kind of stuff because Jesus didn't. Yes, ma'am. How did I get the job that I did? That is an excellent question. Well, I came to faith by reading apologetics books, Josh McDowell books, Evidence Demands a Verdict, More Than a Carpenter. And then after the Navy, after I got out of the Navy, I went to a seminary in Charlotte, North Carolina called Southern Evangelical Seminary, ses.edu. You can look it up. You can take courses there online. You don't even have to move to Charlotte. And you can get this kind of material. So I went to school for it. And see, that's a good reason to stay in school. If you like doing this kind of thing, you got to go to school. And study hard. And do everything your mother says. Yes, Angie?
How do we get more people to help? Like, I know like that college age, they fall away. But I think too, because there's not a lot of ministry for college age kids, but I think a lot of it is that us adults and the people and the church in general, they don't know how to come against those answers or those things like the atheists and the things that they're finding out of colleges from those different classes. So how do we continue to spread out and give more knowledge and help people get more knowledge?
Okay, I think the way to do it, and my friend Jim Wallace, the cold case homicide detective I mentioned earlier, and another friend, Brett Kunkel, who teaches at another ministry, he says, stop teaching people, start training them. What does that mean? Well, Ken does this, right? He trains people on how to evangelize. And we're going to go out and do it. We're not just going to talk about it academically. Because look, all you guys are going to school right now. If I were to stand up here and just say, okay, for the next 10 weeks, we're going to come together and we're going to talk about all this stuff, you're never going to be tested on it. You're never going to have to use it. You're going to be like, oh, great. What's the deal with that? But if I say that 10 weeks from now, we're all going to go to Indiana University and we're going to be sitting in a class and atheists are going to come present to us, and then we're going to ask them questions, and then we're going to go out on campus and we're going to interact with the students and we're going to try and witness to them, you're going to go, we're going to go do that? Yeah, we are. And if you're not ready, you're going to be embarrassed. Then you have some motivation, right? Then you're going to be, okay, I got to know this stuff. How am I going to know this? I'm going to come to these next 10 weeks and we're going to really study and we're going to practice. So when the fight comes, think about it like a heavyweight fighter, right? Fighters get out of shape in between fights, but when they know they got a date on the calendar, they start getting in shape, right? Same kind of thing. We've got to start doing stuff like that. What they do, they're out in California, so they go to UCal Berkeley, and they call up the local atheists. They find them on the internet, and they say, hey, would you like to talk to a bunch of Christian kids? And the atheists are like, oh, yeah, would I love to do that, right? And they set it up on campus, and they say, okay, we want you as an atheist to tell us why you think there is no God based on the moral argument, or whatever. They narrow the topic down, or evil, whatever topic they think is their strongest point. We want you to come and give us an hour presentation on it, and then we're going to ask you questions. And then we're going to go on campus and take a survey, and we're going to interact with people on campus, and we're going to try and see what they believe, and we're going to try and witness to them, that kind of thing. And these kind of trips just are trips that everybody binds together on, everybody learns a lot, and everybody gets fired up over. So if you train them rather than teach them, then you can get people involved. And you get the parents involved too. Hey, you guys want to come? You want to be chaperones? You want to go do this with us? Yeah, okay, let's do it. All right, so that would be one way of doing it.
Better talk than talk.
What's that?
Better caught than taught.
Better caught than taught. Exactly. Yeah, you just, you can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar. Right? Someone wrote a book called that. You can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar. What do you got to do? You got to go get on the bike. That's what you got to do. Yes?
Can you talk to this audience about your work with Summit?
Summit is a great ministry in Colorado. Summit.org. Every summer, 7 2-week sessions, worldview training. It's in Manitou Springs, Colorado. It's also in Bryant College in Tennessee. Dayton, Tennessee, and it's also out in Biola in California. And what you do is you go there for 2 weeks. In the morning you go to class, in the afternoon you go to all sorts of different fun stuff, and at night you go to class again, and you learn Christian worldview and apologetics. It's been going on since 1961. It's an amazing ministry. If you haven't heard about it, you need to hear about it. Young people, you want to go to this at least once, maybe twice. Yes, ma'am. The fourth blood moon, I don't think that has anything to do with the Bible at all. And the reason for that is, like when you look at Jesus saying on the Olivet Discourse, he says the sun will turn, or the moon will turn red, and the sun will fall from the sky, and all this, and the stars will fall from the sky. The sun will go dark, the moon will turn red, the stars will fall from the sky. Jesus is quoting from Isaiah chapter 13. He's quoting from a period when Babylon was overtaken by Cyrus. He doesn't literally mean the moon's going to turn blood. What he means is it's going to be a catastrophic time. And that is the kind of language that was used at the time. It's called apocalyptic language. It doesn't mean literally blood. It means a time of great distress. So I think those are just metaphors or just apocalyptic ways of saying a great and tragic time. Go ahead.
Well, also, there's been, I've seen this pastor that writes books and stuff on it. And,
there's the key right there. I've seen a pastor that writes books on it. Now, he may think it's true, but he's making some good money on those books, isn't he?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Are you talking about John Hagee? Yeah. Okay. Well, it could be, but he doesn't know that, right? Because Jesus didn't know that, right? By the way, it depends on what eschatological view you take. But if you take a dispensational view, there's no necessary connection between the rapture and the tribulation. You know, if there is a rapture, it could occur, and 10,000 years later, it could be the tribulation. The tribulation is supposed to begin when the Antichrist signs the covenant, right? If you take that view. Now, there are many Christians who say that's not the right view. So, even if he's right, he doesn't know he's right, because Jesus didn't know. Jesus, when he was asked, when are these things going to occur? He said, no one knows the time nor the season. Nobody knows the day or the hour. The Son of Man will come like a thief in the night. Well, if John Hagee knows when he's coming back, then Jesus lied. John Hagee doesn't know. Nobody knows. And even if you take the dispensational view, you know all those signs, wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, those are things that occur inside the tribulation. They're not signs of the tribulation. Those are things that occur while the tribulation's going on. So we're looking at the wrong signs. There's no sign for Jesus' coming back. It could happen at any moment. You don't need earthquakes and wars and rumors of wars. He could come right, he could have come 2,000 years ago, right after he left. He could have come right back. He could have come 1,000 years ago. He could come tonight, tomorrow, anytime. All those signs are signs inside the tribulation. They're not signs of the tribulation. It amazes me that people don't get this. And they write all these books. In fact, years ago, there's 88 reasons why Christ will come in 88. 89 reasons why Christ will come in 89. 90 reasons why Christ will come in 1990. Please. There are no reasons other than he said he could come at any moment. Any year is just as good as any other year. So, that's my view anyway. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Paul claims to have gone to heaven,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't have a word to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes me skeptical
Yeah.
of all of these other books.
Mm-hmm.
Is this, I mean, is there something to these people? Is this just a spiritual warfare tactic, or is there?
There is the value of near-death experiences. One value to them is that they show that, let's leave the Bible out of it for a second. They show that naturalism's false. We already know it's false, but it's one way of showing that naturalism's false. Because there's been veridical claims, like somebody says they died, they saw their body going up out of the operating room, over the hospital, and then they're brought back to life and they say, hey, there was just an accident on 3rd and Main. And there was. Or, I saw a sneaker on the roof, and there is a sneaker on the roof. There's claims like that, okay? So something's going on here, but I would not put any stock in any of these to tell us what heaven is like. Because Jesus has the authority, and the Bible writers have the authority to tell us what heaven is like. Not some kid who says he died. In fact, there was one that came out recently that was finally admitted to be a fraud. I mean, how could you verify any of this? They could just say whatever they wanted to, right? There is a guy, Eben Alexander's his name, who was a neuroscientist, who was a naturalist, was an atheist, and had one of these experiences, and now he's going around telling people that heaven is real, but he's not a Christian. And he says some things in the book that are anti-biblical. So I would take all that with a grain of salt. All I would take from it is that, yes, people may have these out-of-body experiences, but it tells us nothing about the final state. Jesus tells us about that. So, in fact, there's a new movie coming out. What is the new movie? Is it Heaven is Real or something? What's the new movie coming out? I'll get it. That's it. He's having an out-of-body experience right now. There is a new movie coming out right now. I don't know. It's an NDE movie, near-death experience. 90 Minutes in Heaven? Was that it? Yeah, I don't know. But, okay, interesting, but I'm not taking any theological doctrine from it. Christian apologetics is for a number of reasons. Ken already mentioned a couple of them. One is for the person individually, right? The time to get answers is not when you're going through difficulty. The time to get answers is before you go through difficulty, right?
It's not for you to sway somebody else to your opinion about what pastor's good in the United States or all of the things that men can argue over. It's really trying to point people to God.
It is trying to point people to God, but it is used to ensure that people have good doctrine. If you look through the scriptures, Paul singles out several people who have bad doctrine. Stay away from this guy. Watch out for this guy. In fact, all 2 Timothy, his last book to Timothy, is all about watch your doctrine closely. And he names people. So I don't have any trouble naming people who I think are teaching falsely. Now, John Hagee, he may be talking about all this stuff. He may, as far as I know, he's a good pastor overall, and he believes in salvation through faith, or by grace through faith. I don't have any problem with that. But if somebody asks me a question about what he thinks about, the end times, and I think he's off base, I'm going to say, look, if Jesus doesn't know, he doesn't know, right? In fact, I had a friend of mine who's a pastor in Charlotte. He started naming some Word of Faith people he thought were very dangerous, and he started getting emails that week from people saying, you should not name people. You should just preach Jesus. And so he got up the next week. He's a Pentecostal pastor. He has no problem telling the truth. He got up the next week and he said, I got all these emails from you guys telling me not to name people, just to preach Jesus. So let me ask you a question. Suppose I said I discovered that there was someone at our church teaching your kids to take drugs and to get involved in sex and pornography. What would be your first question? Who is it? He said, oh no, I can't tell you who it is, but I'll just preach Jesus. What would you say? You better tell us who it is, right? No, we're supposed to tell the truth. We do. We have a responsibility. Yes, absolutely. All right. Last question, and then because we got to go and come back, so we have to go get something to eat or do. We're having food here, aren't we? We're gonna eat again. One thing this church knows how to do is eat. Right? Got some of the best eating anywhere. Darren.
What's your opinion or response concerning abortions in the case of rape or incest in the life of the mother?
Well, I think life of the mother is certainly justified, but rape or incest. In fact, I was. How far are we away from? Hang on a second. I got to think about this. Marion, Indiana. North here, 2 hours. Okay. I was at Michigan State. The same event where this guy was sitting there the whole time like this and said, if there's a good God, why is there evil in the world? Well, we went back and forth about that question several times in the Q&A. And I said, God can bring good from evil. And he was like, no, he can't. You know, that was his basic attitude. And so there was a guy sitting 10 feet from him who raised his hand. I said, yes, sir. In fact, he was sitting right about where you are. I said, yes, sir. He said, and he looked over at the atheist for a minute, and then he looked back at me, and he said, I know of a woman who was raped. The rape nearly destroyed her. And his voice began to crack. And he said, but that woman decided not to punish the child for the sin of the father. She decided that she was going to have that baby and bring that baby up. He said that baby grew up to be a man who became a pastor. By this time, he's weeping openly right in front of everyone. And he said, that pastor has helped lead many people to Christ. And he said, that pastor is me. And he turned to the atheist and he said, if my mom could bring good from evil, so can God. And all I said was, good night. What else could you say after that, right? Well, I went up to the guy afterwards and I said, who are you? He said, my name's Gary Bingham. I'm the pastor of a Methodist church, a Wesleyan church in Marion, Indiana. And he's still there, I think. It's right up the road, right? A couple hours. So his mother brought good from evil. Why punish the baby for the sin of the father? Now let me say politically, I'd be for a law that abolished all abortions except in the case of rape or incest. Not because I think those children shouldn't be protected. They should be. But I'll save most babies rather than say I'm not going to save any unless I can get a law that'll protect them all, right? So for a political situation, you might have to compromise and say, okay, rape and incest, we'll allow that, even though I'm going to keep fighting to try and outlaw that too. But I'd be for a law. In fact, when people bring up the rape and incest objection, I say this. Let's suppose that I would be for a law that allowed for rape and incest abortions, but banned all other abortions. Would you join me on that? What do you think the other person's going to say? No. Well, then why are you bringing up rape and incest then? It has nothing to do with your case. You want abortion in all instances, don't you? Right? So they're just trying to give you the hard case. And I would say, look, I'm with you. Let's ban all abortions except rape and incest. Even though I still think rape and incest abortion should be banned. Yeah. Go ahead, Ginger. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's nonsense, yeah. Uh-huh. Sure. And you could also say, well, look, the Nazis didn't kill 97% of the people they met either. They only killed 3% of them. So let's just keep giving them money then. Of course not. That'd be stupid. All right. Why don't you close this out, Ken, and we'll come back in a couple hours. Is that all right? All right, good.
You guys enjoy that? A lot of information, a lot to think about. Now remember, that's available on DVD. Just fill out a card if you want to take one for yourself. It'll be a little while before we have them ready. We'll let you know. But keep that in mind. And again, at 6 o'clock tonight, we're going to be talking about do miracles, how to make love last forever. Oh wow, that's
Then you'll come back, right?
and,
And I think we're titling it Free Beer and Money.
oh well.
Everyone will be here.
We're going to put that on the radio. Kind of late. And I might even ask Frank tonight if he'll say a few words about Kim Davis, civil disobedience, maybe talk a little bit about the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage. Yeah. Because I know people have been asking me to ask you to talk about it. Not just that, but maybe touch on it. So come back tonight at 6 o'clock, and we're so glad that you guys came. The different churches that join in, it's so great to see unity, and churches get out of their comfort zones and out of their four walls and visit other churches. It's just so great because we are not many bodies. We are one body. We're all on the same team. No matter what church you attend, we're all on the same team. You're on my side. You're on our side. I'm on your church's side. So thank you for coming. And his book table's out here. All these books that he talked about today are available. And you're dismissed. Thank you, guys.